okay, we don't want to be found and we got to hide kind of all evidence of us. So, we're going to bury our dead, or, for whatever reasons. Maybe they have a spirituality behind them too. Who knows? Who knows?
Sure.
But I think absolutely that's one of the reasons why I feel they're more of a people than an animal, is because we've never found a dead body laying in a stream or whatever, because they collect their dead and they dispose of them.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Well, let's move on now to have some fun. I'm going to read a bunch of BFRO reports, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO.net, if you want to read all sorts of people's encounters and reports that they've submitted. These are all going to be from different counties here inside the blue line here in the Adirondack Park. And these are all of these things we're going to read are just like typical things we see pretty frequently, and you'll read pretty often or you'll hear often in people's encounters, but this will be fun. Mm-hmm. So this first one is considered Class A, which is a sighting. And this is in Hamilton County from July 2014 on Route 8, just outside of Wells, New York, near the Sacandaga River. There was a tree knocked down close to it and a yellow road sign shortly after. All right, here we go. This is the encounter. I was driving home through the mountains from a concert last night on Route 8 in Hamilton County, New York. It was 12:37 a.m. I hit a creature that was carrying a deer with my car. The car is damaged from the hood to the rear by this creature, and I know it is at least injured, and its DNA may be on my car. The speed limit was 55, and I was not able to stop in time. When I saw the creature, who was carrying a deer, about to step into the roadway, I hit the brakes but was only able to slow down minimally before impact. I did not really believe in Bigfoot before last night, and I'm still shaken up and have not been able to share this story with anyone. I wanted to stop and see if the creature was okay. I was also scared out of my wits to stop and get out of my car. The creature was huge. It was at least 7.5 feet tall. I've seen drawings and such of Bigfoot, and this creature looked similar, but had white around his hairline, and his fur was dark brown, almost black. I'm shaking just writing this, and I am in such disbelief that this happened to me. I can't even report the accident to the police, and I don't know what I will tell my insurance company. My car is totaled, the creature crushed my windshield wipers together, broke many pieces off the passenger side, and left smears of dirt and blood all over the rear window. No other witnesses. She's not from the area. And then the follow-up with the BFRO investigator followed this up and said that she did indeed report that she hit a deer to her insurance company, so that way she can get the car fixed. But that is
what are you going to tell?
That is a pretty wild
I mean, technically she kind of did, right?
Yeah, and that really paints a picture, a visual, and I've heard so many times people talk about seeing them carrying a deer, or seeing them carrying a cow, or seeing them carrying a horse, because the strength level is just as out of control. And what people talk about, people say like they look like bodybuilders if bodybuilders were normal people and you put steroids on those guys. Like that's what Sasquatches look like as far as their size and strength, and it's just out of control. And
I've heard that numerous times. I mean, you think of a gorilla. That. You think of a gorilla and how much stronger they are than humans, and they're not much. I've seen some people that are probably the size of a gorilla, but are they anywhere near as strong as a gorilla? No, not even close.
Sure.
I'm very familiar with that area. You got south side of Route 8 is Wilcox Lake Wilderness, north side Siamese Ponds, on the other side is Silver Lake Wilderness, and that is a pretty vast area of not a lot of people going off trail. Hunting season, again, different story. People are out there hunting deer and bear, which there's probably a ton of people that have some crazy stories that aren't talking about it or you haven't heard of. But for the vast majority of people, they're staying on the trails. They're going to check out the waterfalls. They're going to check out the Sacandaga River. They're going up into Siamese Ponds or whatever. So it would be very easy for a creature that didn't really want to be found to disappear out there.
Oh, absolutely. Going with, so here's another story. This is near Northville. My friend and I finished preparing for a big outdoors event, and we were sitting outside his home. It was around 11 p.m., and his wife and dog had gone inside for the evening. Across the road from his house, there is a large swamp that goes up to a small mountain. Our talk was cut short by an odd scream about 75 yards into the swamp on the right at ground level. I asked my friend, an avid hunter, what animal screams like that. He didn't know, but we talked that maybe it could be an owl or a fisher. A few minutes later in the woods on our side of the road, a large animal broke a lot of dead branches all at once. It wasn't running, but seemed to have just turned around in one location. A minute or two later, 3 owls hooted between themselves at treetop level in the woods behind his house. The owls seemed to have been about 50 feet apart. We commented about this sudden weird activity when something came from the woods and landed inside of his yard. We were still facing the road and didn't see the object, but I assume it was something around the size of a baseball. He doesn't have a manicured lawn, and it would be impossible to know exactly what it was. I've thought about this incident for a couple of months and could write off the first 3 occurrences that evening, but the object being thrown into the yard made this too much to ignore. My friend was as puzzled as I am. He lives where people are few and far between. Yeah, that's pretty much everyone here in the Adirondacks. But yeah something being thrown. Yeah, rocks being thrown, especially rocks that size. I mean, nothing in the wild is throwing rocks at you. And sure, could have been a person, but there's a bunch of elements to that.
And that's the thing. I mean, it could be an isolated thing when, one thing happens, you hear the scream, and then nothing else happens.
Sure, exactly.
Or you hear, a bunch of ruckus, nothing else happens. A rock being thrown from the woods at you, that's not an ordinary thing. So you might think something's up, like it's kids that play or whatever. But for all that to occur simultaneously, that's where it gets weird. And that reminds me of a story out of Moose River Plains that I heard. A guy was there camping with his dog, and he got there kind of late. He started up a fire, was cooking dinner, just kind of got done eating dinner and was sitting there, and he heard something kind of moving around in the brush, didn't really think anything of it until he said a big rock, like a big rock that a normal person couldn't just pick up and, throw, 20 feet, much less, 45 feet. Because he said he was sitting there and this rock came flying out of the woods at an arc, narrowly missed his head, and landed over to the side of his dog. And his dog kind of just like looked up, like, what was that? Looked over at the woods and just sat there and didn't move.
Sure.
He's like, I got out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet. I would too. And that's some, you said the Moose River Plains, that's more Northville Placid Trail country. Man, I tell you that the Northville Placid Trail, I said on this podcast, it is remote wilderness out there.
It absolutely is.
It's not surprising that there's so many encounters. And I mentioned Sasquatch Chronicles. One of those Adirondacks episodes is also from the Northville Placid Trail.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a little bit of a cluster going on there. A friend of mine, Carla Den, she's, I hope she doesn't mind the name drop, but she's very involved with the Adirondacks. But we got to talking about it one night, and she had an experience that she really can't explain. Like, she tried to explain it away, at first, but the more we got talking about it, she was like, man, I don't know. At first she thought, a coyote came into her campsite, and circled around her tent, and it not just like for a couple minutes, it was there for a while. Any sort, if you've had any sort of encounter with a wild animal, like especially coyotes, I know it would be extremely, extremely rare for them to come up to your tent and circle around. They might, circle around the perimeter or whatever, but they're not coming right up next to your tent and circling around. Bear on the other, a deer wouldn't do that. A moose, possibly. Moose, especially during mating season, they're not scared of anything. They're extremely dangerous animals. But, for all the events that occur with that, it's just that you can't explain it away as an animal.
All right, we're going to come over here to Essex County, New York, where I live, and we're going to start with my hometown here in Lake Placid. All right, this happened right at the base of, drumroll, Cascade Mountain. Here we go.
I think I know this one. Yeah.
All right, this was in 2010 on Route 73 along the Cascade Lakes. Pretty much everybody listening has probably hiked Cascade Mountain. Here we go. I spend most of the summers camping in and around the Adirondacks in my Dodge Caravan. This particular summer, I had stopped at Cascade Lake to spend a few days camping. I had slept soundly the previous night and had woken up around 7 a.m. I decided to get up and start making my breakfast. I had just started the kettle on the camp stove when I looked over at Upper Cascade Lake and could see the mist rising off the surface of the lake. I grabbed my iPhone and walked about 50 yards to the edge of the lake to get a picture. As I approached the break wall, I noticed a dark brown object on the opposite side of the lake at the shore. At first, I couldn't make out what it was, but it seemed to be sitting at the water's edge. I then realized that it must be a bear. The animal looked like it was doing something in the water with its paws, as I could hear a faint splashing sound. I thought it would be a good idea to get a picture, so I brought my iPhone up to my face level and tried to focus it on the animal. As I was focusing in, the animal stood up on two legs. I was startled and pulled down my phone to see this with my own eyes. It took a step towards the tree line and stopped. Almost methodically, as it stopped, it turned its whole upper body to the left and stared at me for a couple of seconds. It turned back and in one step disappeared into the tree line. I immediately went cold and got scared. As I ran back to my campsite, my only thought was that it was going to go left or right. If it went right, I would have to go into the water, and if it went left, it was headed directly for my campsite. I decided that it was best to get the hell out of Dodge, so to speak. I arrived back at my campsite in under a minute. My dog was still asleep on the front seat and didn't stir at all. I opened the passenger side sliding door of my van and started to throw all of the camping gear back into the van, making quite a mess inside as I did. I closed the door and then jumped into the driver's seat and floored the gas to leave. As I was driving out, I kept looking at my left driver's side window to see if I could observe it again, but I saw nothing. I drove all the way into Lake Placid and parked at a mall parking lot to gather my thoughts and think about what had taken place. I was quite shaken up, and I kept replaying the experience over and over in my head, trying to make sense of what I had seen. I could not ascertain its height exactly because of the distance, but I would guess that it was approximately 7 to 8 feet tall. It was covered head to toe in shaggy dark brown hair or fur. I could see the sunlight shining off its back as it turned to go into the tree line and could see the brown coloration as it turned away from me. When it turned to stare at me, I could not make out any facial features, but I knew that it saw me. The upper body was massive and stocky like a football player's build. It had very long arms that went below its waist. I could also make out what I assumed were the shape of hands. It walked upright and paused before slowly turning its upper body to look directly at me. It stared at me for approximately 5 to 10 seconds and turned back to face the tree line. It took 1 to 2 steps and disappeared into the forest. I could see a couple of branches move after it went into the trees. It was then I decided to leave. I did not hear anything other than the initial splashing it made with the water when I first thought it was a bear. I did not return to the area until 3 years later with a friend to camp. Nothing has happened on subsequent trips to the area of Cascade Lake. I have had 2 other odd experiences in other stretches of the ADK on other trips. So, yeah, fascinating story right there.
It is, and a lot of people would say, well, it couldn't be a bear because we have black bear up here in the Adirondacks, and there are certain genetic anomalies that will give a black bear per se a cinnamon looking color. So that right there, people might try and explain that away, and bears will stand up on their hind legs and appear to be bipedal and standing there on their 2 feet. However, I feel like the thing that is different here is a bear might stand up and take a step, maybe 2 steps if it's like reaching for food or something. A black bear, we're not talking a grizzly, but it's not gonna turn methodically and then take a step and then look back over at you, like turn its whole body and look at you and acknowledge that you're there and then turn back slowly and then step up into the woods. It would have dropped down by that time to, all fours and then moved out of the way. And I know exactly where he's talking about. I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to the 46 of 46 podcast should definitely know where that spot is. But, there's a sheer rock wall
Yep.